Welcome to Hyperpolyglot Activists, Learn Languages, Make a Difference. My name is Dr. Carlos Lopez, and we're here again at the Ateneo de Zamboanga University, joined by Dr. Team Cañones. Welcome to the show. So my first question is going to be, what is your relationship with Chabakano, with the language? How did you learn it, and how have you utilized that language in your research?
So I grew up in Zamboanga, and that's the language I grew up in the household. So we get to use that in our everyday conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So the way things are done at home, I think when it comes to authority, that people speak in that language to instruct us.
Mm-hmm.
And a number of times also I get to practice it a lot among my peers in the school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the transactional part that as I come over age and I use them in research, it's not really Chabakano. We have to switch to the use of English. So Chabakano this time is like just the object of my study because I want to find out at least in terms of origin, how did Chabakano come about, because I do specialize in history.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's no literature that says definitively what or how Chabakano came about, and that's a point of interest that I wanted to.
So in that sense, we have heard hypotheses from Kate Winham, right, 1956, from Parkall and Jacobs and Fernandez and Cipolla. Is there any of these hypotheses that resonates more with you, or that you give more credibility to in terms of accounting for the origin of Chabacano?
I think for a number of them, they have hypothesized things differently, but I resonate more with someone you have not mentioned, Lipsky. Lipsky is also one of those who made a very substantial study on how he was theorized and how Chabacano came about. Mm-hmm. So I was just I just held some of the things in question, and that's where I have to explore in terms of the pieces of evidence that will back Lipsky's hypothesis, like how did it come to amass a lot of Hiligaynon, let's say, language elements.
Yeah.
So this is where I have tried to ascertain if there is an equivalent in historical archival record that says that Hiligaynon or the Ilonggo came here in huge numbers, so much that they have influenced the development of the language. So my hypothesis surrounds more on the development of the language around the early 1800s. And I think, well, this is a postulation that Lipsky was very keen in pointing out. He has not really fleshed out as to how we can actually verify if those hypotheses can be fixed in terms of the evidence that we can get from history. So that's where I'm coming in and filling in the void, if you call it the void, to in a way reinforce the former postulations, but this time I'm expanding it to include in terms of geographical scope. I'm not just confining it within the presidio.
Right.
Like we mentioned about the soldiers, the design soldiers,
Yeah.
and the sketch. But mine is more of the offshoot from that format, and this community that came together. And in a way, that's where I draw the first incipient development of Chabakano.
And so how important is ascertaining the origin of Chabacano in 2026?
I think because we have been discussing about the present state of Chabacano and even its future, but how do we fix this temporal variations if we have not even fixed what was it back in the past?
Yeah.
So before we can make any further postulations about the present, or maybe that's more accessible, but the future is something elusive.
Yeah.
But the past is something that we can verify if only we go back to historical records. So I deem that that's one of the critical activities that we have to venture first before we move about or make any big claims about the language without knowing the past of that language.
And talking about the future, how do you imagine Chabacano in 50 years, 100 years? What will happen with the language?
Because we are situated in a place where you have all this configuration of people coming from various geographies, and somehow this new waves of migrations are helping out in developing, or they become the carriers of the language. So I suppose it will still have some semblance of what Chabacano is right now. I noticed that if I were to make some postulations as to how it has differed from the, let's say, 1930s Chabacano, I think there's not much difference except that there might have been some heavy implications coming from the new waves of migrants trying to infuse their new elements in it. But for the most part, it's still Chabacano. So if this is widely used in public spaces, by public spaces, I just don't mean the schools, transactional, the malls, and the streets. This is likely to be a living language that we're not fearful of it becoming extinct, like most of the endangered languages around us.
And you mentioned infiltrations into Chabacano. So are external linguistic influences interferences in Chabacano, or can there be also transfers? Can there be incorporations that are not perceived negatively, incorporations that amount to an enrichment of the Chabacano language? And what would those incorporations be like? Meaning, if we have, for instance, more Spanish words, is that an interference or an enrichment? If we have more English words, if we have more Tagalog words, how do you see the positive or negative valuation of those influences into Chabacano?
I have to approach that question as a non-language expert, but as to how Chabacano came out and came to be as a language, I think for the most part, it has borrowed a lot, and there were these transfers and implications. I'm not sure if I can qualify that as a negative form of interference, but somehow because of, if ever you call it interference, somehow because of those, the language thrived. So I think those are necessary elements to keep it alive. So I think it's just a matter of we document these changes over time, giving credence to how it is at some point, characterize it at some point. But as a language, as a living language, we have to come to terms with accepting that it will become, in ways slightly different from how it is now. And that should be a good thing for
otherwise it will be dead. And last question then. We talk about how little perhaps the language has changed since the 1930s, but one could also argue that the internet has substantially altered the nature of the language. What's your take on that? How has the internet affected the evolution of Chabacano?
I think we can qualify that in terms of the demographics. This one is particularly true to the younger generation.
Yeah.
So for that particular generation of Chavacano, it may have exhibited different character by this time. I am not in a position to say that this development is counterproductive to the growth or development of the language, but somehow it's a recognition that we have to make because of all these changes around us. This it's how they call it, not exponential, but the accelerated changes around us. And internet being one of those channels by which all these changes are transmitted. I think the language may, I would not say suffer. It's not suffering from anything negative in terms of form, but somehow it's contributing to its development. Like the position I was adopting earlier, it shouldn't be considered a bad thing that these developments are shunned away. They have to be embraced because that's part of the stimulus or stimuli that will get the language going.
Definitely. So we very much hope that Chabacano thrives in the 21st century, and thank you so much, Dr. Cañones, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.